My boyfriend and I love camping, so about 2 weeks ago, we decided to go to the coast since we had Friday off from university. We made a plan to spend the weekend hiking and camping. The idea was to stay in 3 different towns, hiking between each one. We packed our tent, food and gear, excited to spend time outdoors and explore new places. This part of the story is about the first place we stayed. The first town was very small with just a few houses and farms. It felt quiet and empty. Since it was the off-season, there weren't many tourists, though the town usually attracts visitors. The main reason people come is to see a huge abandoned city left behind from the times of ancient Greek civilization. The ruins were incredibly old, and you could feel the history just by standing there. There were about 5 or 6 campsites in the area, and one of them had really good reviews on TripAdvisor. So we didn't bother calling ahead. We thought it would be easy to find a spot. We headed straight to that campsite. But as we walked in, we noticed something strange. There was no one around. The whole place was empty, no campers, no staff. We knocked on the door and called out, but no one answered. Through the window, we saw the outdoor bar was still open and there was food left out on the kitchen table. It seemed like the owners couldn't have gone far. My boyfriend thought it was a bit odd that they'd leave everything open like that, but we figured it was a small, safe community with no real crime, so we didn't worry about it. We went to check out the other campsites. The first one told us they were closed. Their grounds had been messy lately, but they suggested another place for us to stay. Then we asked them about the first campsite, the one we had visited, and the man just said, just don't. I really wouldn't recommend going there. He didn't give a clear answer. His response felt odd, but we didn't press him for more details. The other place he suggested was also closed, but then I found a signboard for the first campsite with a phone number on it. We called. A man answered. He told us that he and his wife, who run the campsite, were out for a few hours, but would be back by the evening. He said we could go ahead and set up our camp and we'd meet them later. The campsite was a little out of the way, but it was very beautiful. So we set up our tent and left for the day. We spent the whole day exploring and hiking, and after a long tiring day we started heading back around 10 p.m. after dinner. That's when things got really creepy. When we returned, the campsite was still completely empty. No one had come back, and it was getting late. My boyfriend called the owners again. They told us they had decided not to return that night. They said we could just leave the money under a table mat. They also told us the kitchen and bathrooms were open if we needed them. The campsite was dark. The area where we had set up our camp was huge and had no lighting at all. My boyfriend started to feel uneasy right away. He was worried why would 2 business owners leave their entire property completely open to strangers and their house only partly closed. As we walked back to our camp, he kept whispering that something felt wrong. He was looking around constantly. He's usually pretty calm, so I told him if he really felt that uneasy, we could just go to the guest house where we'd had dinner and stay there for the night. He turned on the flashlight on his phone and kept sweeping it across the area. The more he looked around, the more nervous he seemed. We decided to pack up and leave. I started folding the tent since it takes a bit of time and asked him to just hold the light still. But he kept moving it around, checking behind the trees, scanning the bathrooms. At one point he snapped at me to hurry up. It felt a little rude, but he was clearly scared. As soon as I folded the tent, we shoved it into its bag and packed up the rest of our gear as fast as we could. I tried to reassure him, tried to keep things calm, but just thinking about that moment still gives me chills. The road back to the main part of town was dark and completely empty. That's when he finally said something. "There's something I wanted to mention," he began, but I didn't want to say it while we were still at the campsite. He hesitated. Then he said, "I didn't want to scare you, but I'm absolutely sure. I saw someone hiding in the dark behind the wooden cabins, and near the bathrooms, twice. No one else was supposed to be there, just us. I felt the blood drain from my face. I tried to tell myself it might have been an animal, a cat, something small, but he was sure it was a human figure, someone walking, someone standing, watching. That's why he kept checking the area. That's why he told me to be quiet and to pack quickly. I was on the verge of tears. My whole body was tense and I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting someone to step out from behind a tree. We didn't feel safe until we reached the lit part of the quiet town. We made it to the guest house, booked a room, got the key, and locked the door behind us, twice. I'm usually pretty skeptical, but this time I really believe my boyfriend saw something. I don't know who or what it was, but I don't want to find out. Dark and isolated places have always made me uneasy. From 2013 to 2019, I worked in outdoor education at various summer camps and outdoor centres across Canada, mostly in Ontario. I also spent one season out west in the Rocky Mountains. Since I had grown up attending sleepaway camps and participating in leadership programs with backcountry canoe trips, I felt ready to lead a group of teenage girls on a 2-week camping trip. The trip was based out of a camp in Georgian Bay and would take place in the Temagami region. The Temagami region is located between North Bay, Sudbury and Timmins in Ontario. It's a place known for its beautiful provincial parks, scenic hiking trails and long canoe routes. It is also home to the Bear Island Reserve, which holds deep cultural significance. Our trip followed a popular route starting at Whitefish Falls and ending at Highway 11 after 14 days. We paddled through calm lakes, hiked through thick forest, carried our canoes over land, and spent our nights around the campfire under the stars. We had a satellite phone to check in with our camp director each day and to use in case of an emergency. There were also several points along the route where we could exit if needed. Everything was going well and we were having fun, aside from some minor dehydration and a few small injuries. But then, things changed on the second to last night of our trip. We had set up camp on the shore of a small empty island in Bear Lake, which is part of the Bear Island Reserve. The area was stunning still waters and a clear view of the main island, where most of the community's 250 residents live. After putting out our campfire, we all went to sleep. About an hour later, I was jolted awake by the loud sound of a motorboat. Now that wasn't too unusual. Bear Lake is big, and people often travel between the mainland and their homes by boat, but it was around 11 p.m. and the lake had been quiet for hours. Then the motor suddenly stopped, silence, and then shouting. It sounded like at least one man and a woman, and they were clearly angry, yelling back and forth. I couldn't make out what they were saying. They were too far away. Then the woman screamed, and I heard a splash. Then nothing. Just silence again. I was terrified, and I hoped more than anything that the girls were still asleep. But I wasn't that lucky. I could hear their voices whispering nervously from inside their tent. They were awake and scared. I was just about to unzip my tent to check if the boaters had an accident, when suddenly my entire tent lit up. A bright light swept slowly across me, then across the girls' tent. They went quiet immediately. In the calmest voice I could manage, I told them to stay completely still. I hoped staying silent would keep them safe. The bright light moved back to my tent, then back to theirs. I guessed it was a boat using a searchlight to scan the shoreline. It felt like forever, but it was probably only 5 minutes. Then the light went out. The motor started again. It faded slowly into the distance, swallowed by the dark. Silence returned. I grabbed the satellite phone and called our camp director, who gave me the number for the local police. When I spoke to them, they said they would pass along the information to the local native police on Bear Island. None of us really slept that night. At 5 a.m, I got up, took out a canoe and paddled around the island. I thought maybe someone had fallen into the water and managed to swim to shore, but I didn't find anyone, and there was nothing floating in the lake. After what had happened, none of us wanted to spend another night out there. I called the camp and asked them to meet us at the pickup point a day early. We paddled hard. No one really spoke. I think none of us wanted to say out loud what we were thinking, what we might have heard, or what could have happened if we had made a sound, if we had moved when that light was on our tents. This happened several years ago when I was around 10 or 11 years old. The place wasn't exactly remote, but it was a large wooded ranch covering over 100 acres, located in the southwest part of the United States. My family owns this land and we gather there for family reunions every year. We usually stay for about 5 days, camping out and enjoying nature together. There's a specific spot on the ranch where everyone sets up camp, cooks meals and eats together. To get there, we drive through a small village and pass through several gates over a distance of about 2 miles. The first gate is located just beyond a set of railroad tracks. That detail is important later. It helps you understand the layout of the area. Since I'd been camping at the ranch for as long as I could remember, and because it was private land, my parents trusted me to explore on my own during the day as long as I didn't go too far. I spent my time wandering around the area near our camp, searching for arrowheads that might be hidden in the dirt, or trying to catch tadpoles in the small ponds scattered around. Sometimes I would also look for interesting rocks, or just quietly watch for wildlife. On this day after lunch around 11:30, I told my mum I was heading to a nearby creek. I was excited to catch some tadpoles to bring back to camp. I also wanted to make sure I returned in time for a swimming trip my cousins were planning. They were going to visit a nearby river where we could swim and have fun, and I didn't want to miss it. I had already planned to spend a little time at the creek looking for tadpoles and maybe finding a few cool rocks, but I made sure to keep track of the time so I wouldn't be late. I reached the creek and spent about 15 minutes there catching several tadpoles. The water flowed gently, and there were some smooth flat rocks I had to walk over to reach the best spot. Getting there was a little tricky. Now to return to camp I had 2 choices. I could climb up a steep slope covered with loose rocks or take a longer flatter trail that wound around. I usually preferred climbing the slope because it was quicker, but today I decided against it. I didn't have a top for the water bottle I was using to carry the tadpoles, and I was worried that if I slipped, I might spill the water and accidentally harm them. I had never walked the longer trail by myself before, but I'd been on it with my dad, and I felt confident I could find my way back. As I walked, I focused on searching for arrowheads in the eroded parts of the trail where the dirt had washed away. The trail was surrounded by trees and thick shrubs, and the quiet started to make me feel a little uneasy. Then something strange happened, something I still can't explain. It felt like someone had flipped a light switch, like someone had snapped their fingers. And suddenly I was wide awake, fully alert. When I glanced around, I realized I wasn't on the same trail anymore. The surroundings had changed. The trees were different. The path wasn't the one I had been following. Somehow I was standing near the railroad tracks, and it was completely dark. My mum was in front of me, shaking my shoulders and shouting. 2 things stood out to me in that moment as clear as day one. The mix of fear, anger and relief in my mum's tearful eyes as she yelled, and 2, the confusion that washed over me, not understanding where I was or how I got there. The air felt cold. I could hear the wind in the distance, but I was too shocked to make sense of what was happening. The last thing I remembered was walking the trail back to camp, And now it was night time. I was at the railroad tracks, over 2 miles from where I had been just moments ago or so. I thought the best way I can describe it is like in the movie The Butterfly Effect. The main character would be in one moment and then suddenly he'd wake up somewhere completely different with no memory of how he got there. My parents drove me back to camp, and that's when I found out it was 10:30 p.m. That meant I had been missing for nearly 11 hours, and I still can't explain what happened during most of that time. My family had been searching for me all day, calling my name, checking the trails, retracing every step. Everyone was worried, and when they finally found me, I could see the overwhelming relief in their faces. I had always been a good kid. I didn't break rules. I didn't wander off. So my parents were more confused than angry. They kept asking me what happened, but I didn't have any answers. I tried to tell them I had no memory of how I ended up at the tracks, but they didn't believe me. They thought I'd gotten lost and was just too embarrassed to admit it. But the truth is, I genuinely don't remember. And even now, all these years later, I still wonder what really happened that day. Was it just a coincidence that I felt so uneasy on the trail? Or was something else at play I wish I knew? I really do. At the time I was in my first year of high school. My dad delivered pizzas for a living, but I was really proud of him because he worked so hard to take care of me. After a while we moved into a new house, and that's where it all started. I remember lying in bed around 11:30 p.m. Suddenly I heard a little girl's voice coming from downstairs. It sounded like a cry that turned into a laugh. It lasted for about 3 or 4 seconds. I didn't think much of it. I just assumed my dad had made the noise. So I got up to check on him. I walked to the top of the stairs and looked down at the living room. It was completely dark. I glanced over and saw my dad in his room. Hey, did you hear that?" I asked. He said, "I thought that was you," and that's how it all started. Over the next few days, things got worse. My dad began having terrible nightmares. He said he was being held down in his bed, and a dark human-like figure crawled onto his chest and started screaming. Then many others began screaming all around him. He told me the nightmares got even worse after that, but now he doesn't want to talk about them anymore. For a while I wasn't sure if anything real was happening. I told myself there had to be a scientific explanation for the sounds we heard, for the things we saw, but then footsteps in the attic began following us every day. No matter where we went, we heard footsteps above us. Even worse, there were dead bugs everywhere. Thousands of flies clung to the windows. The house was full of them. It was unbelievable. Still, even after all this, I wasn't completely sure. I knew something was happening, and honestly I was starting to believe my dad, but I was too scared to fully accept it. Then came the really scary part. I was sleeping next to my dad because he'd had another bad nightmare. Heavy objects started being thrown at us in the middle of the night, cans of food in particular. Our house was set up so that the living room was open to the kitchen. I was on the couch, and my dad was on a mattress on the floor next to me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was the first time I ever saw my dad cry. He prayed out loud, asking God to make it stop. Things slowly calmed down, but we couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. We even thought about sleeping in the car, but it was freezing, so we took turns staying awake. The next day my dad went to work, and I walked home from school. It was only about a 5-minute walk. When I sat down in the house, I felt strange, drained, like something had taken all the energy out of me. It didn't feel normal. As it started getting dark, I knew something was wrong. Everything went silent, completely silent. I thought maybe I had muted the TV, but then I realised I couldn't hear anything at all. I even tapped the couch a few times, but no sound came out. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A flash of light, but it didn't feel real. It didn't feel like it belonged to this world. And then, I felt pain. Not on my body exactly, but a deep mental pain. So strong it felt physical. It was right next to me, on my right side. I think it touched me. I felt a sudden intense heat on my arm, but I was so tired, so drained, I could barely move. I was terrified and hopeless. I picked up my phone and in a low voice I said, "Dad, help me." I think he already knew something was wrong. Just a few minutes later he arrived, then he took me to my mum's place. They were divorced and they didn't like each other, but that night, none of that mattered. I slept all day. I was completely exhausted. The next day we went to a specialist, someone my dad knew from our church. He had helped people with situations like ours before. As soon as we walked into his office, he told us to sit down. After we explained everything, he looked at us and said, "You need to leave the house right now and take your cat and dog with you." Our pets had been acting strange the entire time. They were constantly shaking, shivering. They would stare at random corners of the room, and sometimes their eyes would move around the room together, as if they were watching something we couldn't see. At first I thought it was funny, but after I started to understand what was happening, it wasn't funny anymore. It was terrifying. So we took the pets, we packed some clothes, and we left for a hotel. Our pet stayed with my mum, but she didn't believe any of it. She even accused my dad of making it up. A few days later, the specialist and 3 others went to our house. They asked us to join them that evening. When we arrived, the house was completely messed up. Everything was on the floor. They told us we needed to remove certain items, but I can't remember what they were. Then they started cleaning the house. It took weeks to get things back to normal. I'm probably leaving out a lot. There are pieces I don't remember. But that sound, that little girl crying and then laughing, that part is still crystal clear in my mind. I got my driver's license later than most people, but since I lived in the city, it wasn't a problem. Walking public transport and ride-sharing apps like Uber were always easy to use. I could get anywhere I needed without any issues. I usually took Uber to work, and over time I got to know many of the local drivers. But unfortunately, there were a few times when some drivers made me feel uneasy. Nothing too serious. Until one experience that still scares me today. At the time I was about 22 or 23 years old, working an office job downtown. I ordered an Uber to take me home after work. I didn't know the driver, but everything seemed normal at first. I got into the car, we said hello, he confirmed my address and we started driving. The driver was a man in his 30s, maybe a bit overweight, smiling a lot, but he kept looking at me through the rearview mirror, much more than what felt normal. Then he told me he had picked me up before. Since I used Uber almost every day, I didn't find that strange, at least not at first, but after a while the things he said started to feel off. He began asking personal questions, like where I lived, and if I had a boyfriend. That made me really uneasy. Then he asked why I no longer worked at my old job. That surprised me. He remembered where I used to work even though I hadn't worked there since I was 19. That meant he remembered me from 3 or 4 years ago. He also knew things about my life, my hometown, where I went to high school and college, what I studied, even how many siblings I had. That might not sound strange if he were just a friendly, attentive driver. But the thing is, I was never a talkative passenger. I usually stayed quiet in Ubers avoided small talk, and never shared personal details. When asked, I'd give vague answers. Oh, about 40 minutes south, or, yeah, I have some siblings, but we're not that close. I always avoided giving too much away, especially to someone who already knew where I lived. It felt really strange that he remembered so much about me. Then he started asking more personal questions, like if I was in a relationship, what year I graduated high school, and where I liked to hang out with friends. He even knew about my male roommate and asked random questions about my relationship with him. By this point, I was feeling really uncomfortable. My answers got shorter, but he didn't seem to notice. Eventually, I stopped trying to answer altogether. I gave one-word replies or pretended I didn't hear him. He'd give up on one question and move right on to the next. He remembered a lot of personal information about me, much of which I don't recall ever sharing. Even though it was clear I was uncomfortable, he kept asking about my personal life. Throughout the whole 10-minute drive, he kept glancing back at me in the rear-view mirror. Every chance he got, as we got closer to my stop, he started giving me compliments. You have a great smile. You seem really fun to be around. He told me my name was pretty, that I was beautiful and smart. Then he said he hoped we'd be paired again because I was his favourite rider. Right before I got out, he turned round, smiled, and said, "This is the longest ride we've taken together. Then I hope to see you soon. Have a good night." I got out of the car, walked around the side of the building, and waited for him to leave. Then I reported him. Thankfully, this was back when Uber had real people for customer service. They told me he'd be blocked from picking me up again, and they would investigate whether he should keep using the app. For the next few weeks, I took the bus instead. I never saw him again, and I never had another Uber ride like that. But it still creeps me out, how he knew so much about me. I was taking summer classes at the time, and we had a 3-day weekend in June, so I thought it would be a good idea to explore the wilderness in Virginia. I searched on Google and found a state park with a nice trail and decided to go there. Then I packed my backpack with all the essentials: food, water, a tent, and some clothes. I also made sure to tell my roommate and family which trail I was going to hike, just in case something happened. When I got close to the park, I saw a small outdoor shop where hikers on the Appalachian Trail often stop, so I decided to go in and get a map of the area. While talking to the owner, he mentioned a lesser-known trail, one that had a cool waterfall and a swimming hole. He told me it was a beautiful spot, one not many people knew about. I thought it sounded like a great place to visit, so I decided to take that trail instead, and asked him to show me where it was on the map. It was outside the state park, but he said it was worth it. I paid for the map and thanked the owner. Then I texted my roommate and parents about the new trail, just to be safe. After that, I parked my car and started my adventure. Now, I should mention, the waterfall was just a side trip from my main hike. I was planning to spend 3 days and 2 nights on the trail, so I started on a section of the Appalachian Trail. It was pretty busy with people, and some of them were really fun to talk to. But as I got farther from the main trails, I saw fewer and fewer people. In the early afternoon, about 3 miles from my destination, I noticed it was unnaturally silent. No birds, no bugs, not even wind. And I started getting that weird feeling, like someone was watching me. I tried to ignore it, told myself I was just overthinking. When I got to the waterfall, it wasn't as impressive as I had hoped, but it was still nice to see. There was a good-sized area to swim, so I took off my clothes and went for a swim. While I was getting dressed again, I started whistling to myself. I was whistling Chill Bill because it was stuck in my head, and that's when I heard something whistle, the same tune, back at me. I thought it was a bird copying me, so I kept whistling back and forth with it. It would repeat whatever I whistled, and I thought it was pretty cool, but as I was setting up camp, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched again. Goosebumps, hairs standing up. As night fell, I built a small fire and used my jet boil to cook dinner. While I was doing this, I noticed something. There was no sound at all, just complete silence. Part of me felt like I wasn't safe, like something wanted me to leave, but I ignored it. I crawled into my tent with my flashlight and a book and went to sleep without any problems. But when I woke up the next morning, my campsite was a mess. My camp stool was missing, and my bear bag with all my food had been cut down. At first I thought maybe some clever animal had chewed through the rope, but when I looked at it, the rope wasn't chewed, it was cut cleanly, like with a very sharp blade. Keep in mind, I was at least 6 to 8 miles from the nearest road. While I was staring at the mess, I heard a branch snap in the distance. I turned to look but didn't see anything. Then I heard the whistling again. It was the same tune from yesterday, but this time it sounded off, sinister. My whole body tensed. I knew then I needed to trust my instincts and leave, quickly. The whistling kept going non-stop, and it seemed to come from all directions. I packed up my camp as fast as I could, didn't bother to do it neatly, just shoved everything into my bag. The whistling kept getting louder, closer, until I finally snapped. I stood up and yelled into the woods. The whistling stopped. For a moment everything was silent. Then it repeated what I had said, but in my own voice. It sounded like me, but distorted, like it was coming from an old broken TV. The second I heard that, I threw on my pack and ran. I could hear it behind me switching between whistling and copying my voice. It felt like it was playing with me, staying close but not too close. Eventually the sound started to get further away. Then it stopped. When it did, I stopped too, and I made the mistake of turning around. I wish I hadn't, because right next to me I heard the most terrifying screech. It was so loud and unnatural, it felt like it was coming from inside my skull. I ran, harder and faster than I ever had. I didn't dare look back. I just focused on moving. Less than half a mile later, I came across a couple who were also backpacking. They looked concerned when they saw me. I must have looked terrified. I quickly told them what had happened. They asked if I had been the one screaming, and if I was okay. I told them everything, and they decided not to go down the trail I had just come from. Together we made our way to a more populated trail. As soon as I got back to my car, I drove straight to one of the park ranger stations and reported what had happened. But since the site was outside the park, they told me it wasn't their responsibility. Still, they said they'd send a ranger to check it out. The parking lot at the ranger station was right next to the woods, and just as I was getting into my Jeep, I heard the Chill Bill tune again, whistled, softly, from the trees, right in front of me. When I got home and told my roommate why I was back after only one night, all he said was, "Bro, I'm never going camping with you." I grew up in a small coal town in the Appalachian Mountains. Our house was on the side of a mountain that looked out over the valley below. It was a great place for a kid who loved being outside. We didn't have any close neighbours, just trees and sky. There were endless woods to explore and play in. Above our house was a ridge that marked the edge of a state park, but all the trails and public areas were far down in the valley, separated by thick forest and lots of no trespassing signs. Because of this, we hardly ever had hikers coming onto our land. A dirt road led from our house up the mountain to the top of the ridge, where the remains of a burned-down cabin still stood. From there you could follow the ridge to a flat area that was popular with my dad's hunting friends. One of them had put up a trail camera during the off-season to keep an eye on the wildlife there. We had coyotes, the occasional bear, mountain lions, bobcats, and a whole lot of deer. Beyond that spot, the ridge continued to a clearing with big flat rocks and a massive electrical tower. I used to love climbing it. It became one of my favourite places to go meow our black lab, Felicia, and a backpack full of snacks and books. One early fall day when I was about 13, I packed some food, grabbed a book, and hiked up with Felicia. I was careful to avoid the trail camera since it was one of those old film types, and I had already gotten in trouble for wasting a whole roll by messing around near it. I reached my favourite rock by the power lines and sat down to read. The sky was clear, the wind soft. Everything felt still. That's when Felicia suddenly started barking loud, angry, and persistent. At first, I didn't pay much attention. She loved to chase deer, but this time, she didn't run into the woods. She stayed close, growling at something hidden in the thick brush on the steep mountain slope facing the park. I'd thought about hiking down that way before, but it was difficult terrain. Years ago, the area had been cleared to install the tower. Now it was overgrown with briars and weeds. The rocks that were great for climbing at the top turned into dangerous obstacles down the slope. Besides, there was easier access closer to the park entrance. This way led to an undeveloped area at the back of the campgrounds, hard to reach by car or by foot. So I was surprised, really surprised, to see a man pushing his way up through the brush from that direction. Nervous, I held on to Felicia's collar and called out, hello. She liked to jump on people when she got excited, and the slope was steep. The last thing I wanted was her knocking someone down the mountain. My parents had argued before about lawsuits after she knocked over a jogger in the park. The man smiled, freed himself from the thorns, and climbed up to the base of my rock. He seemed normal, friendly even. Average height, average build, dressed like a hiker, but he wasn't carrying any gear, no backpack, no water. Still, something about him made me uneasy. Maybe it was the way he looked at me like he was sizing me up. At the time, I couldn't explain it. Now, as an adult, I understand. Hi there, he said. Where'd you come from? He didn't have an accent, which stood out to me. Our region has a strong local accent and we don't get many visitors. I live just down the hill, I said. I was hiking with my dog. She seems like a nice dog, he replied. Felicia was still growling, ears pinned back, teeth showing. But he didn't seem concerned at all. You should have her on a leash, he added. You wouldn't want to get in trouble with the park. We put her on a leash when we're in the park, I told him. But this part is our property. He didn't react to the fact that he was trespassing. Instead, he said casually, Still, you're so close. You never know who you might run into up here. No one from the park comes up here, I said. My tone was sharper than I meant, but I was annoyed, a stranger telling me what to do with my dog on my own land. I'm from the park, he said, smiling again. I'm one of the rangers. Just wanted to check out the property. What would you have done if she'd attacked me? You could get in big trouble. That's when my stomach dropped. We only had one ranger, and he was a close family friend. This guy, he definitely wasn't him, but I was too scared to call him out. So I calmly got Felicia's leash, clipped it on, and stood up. I'm sorry, we'll let you get on with your hike. I need to go home. Do your parents know you're up here? Oh, yes. They expect me home soon, I added quickly. Dad comes up to check the trail cameras. That was a lie, but it was the only thing I could think of. For the first time, the stranger's smile faded. Trail cameras. Yes, I said confidently. There are a lot up here. He and his friends like to hunt. The smile returned, but colder now. Well, this would be great for hunting then. He stepped closer. Felicia lunged. I barely kept hold of the leash. She almost broke free, but he didn't even flinch. You should head back, he said softly. Keep a tight hold on that leash. Maybe I'll see you up here again sometime. Yes. Maybe I mumbled, thinking to myself, never again. I pulled Felicia away quickly, glancing back over my shoulder as I went. He stayed where he was, just staring after me with that same creepy smile. Once he was out of sight, I picked up the pace. Felicia growled a few times and I heard branches snapping behind us. But when I turned, there was no one there. I cut straight across the clearing, right in front of the trail camera. I didn't care. I just wanted to get away. When we reached the road that led home, I unclipped Felicia's leash and started jogging. She stayed close the whole way. At first, I didn't tell my parents. They already worried about me hiking alone. I didn't want them to forbid it completely. And besides, I'd convinced myself I was overreacting. He was probably just a hiker. Maybe he made up the ranger story to tease me. Still, I didn't hike back up to the ridge that week. I stayed in the woods below the house instead. At the end of the week, I came home from school to find my dad really angry. He wanted to know if I'd messed with the trail camera. His friend had come to collect the film and discovered it had been turned off with only a few photos taken. At first, I denied everything. I was scared of getting in trouble. But then, I remembered the man. When I told Dad about him, he thought I was making it up to cover for myself. So he called the park ranger, our friend, and asked if there was a new ranger we didn't know about. There wasn't. But after hearing my story, the ranger told Dad something strange. The campground worker had found someone camping illegally behind the campgrounds just the weekend before. An out-of-state guy, young, average-looking, very friendly, sound familiar. A few days later, my dad's friend developed the camera film. There were only a few photos, but the last one chilled me. It was of me and Felicia crossing the clearing, heading home. I'm glad I told the stranger there were multiple cameras. I guess he gave up when he couldn't find them. Since then, my parents have moved down into the valley to a nice neighbourhood. I've moved out of town. The old house fell into disrepair after it was sold and eventually burned down. No one lives there now, but the clearing at the top of the ridge is still a popular spot with hunters. And sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I still see the man's smile and the way he looked at me like I was prey. Around 5 years ago, when I was 13, I used to sneak out of my window at night and walk around. I found peace and quiet in the middle of the night. It helped me escape from my caretakers. I would usually be out from midnight until 3 or 4 in the morning. Then one night I reached the entrance of a small forest. It was too dark to go in, so I turned back. But the next night I brought a flashlight and I put some sticks in the ground to mark my way back. I didn't see much, just a hedgehog, but it was the most peaceful place I had found during my night walks. So I went back 4 more times. On the 4th night, it was lightly raining and I decided to go deeper into the woods. This time I didn't bother leaving sticks. I was sure I could find my way back without them. After about 10 minutes of walking, I saw a light coming from a tree far away. I turned off my flashlight and waited, but the light didn't appear again. So I kept walking around. I even climbed a few trees. About 25 minutes later, I saw the light again. But this time it was much closer. I turned off my flashlight and climbed up into a tree to wait. The light was coming from another flashlight, but it wasn't mine. The person wasn't walking directly toward me, but they were slowly getting closer. When he got near enough, I saw it was a man. He was breathing heavily and looking around as if he was watching his back. His shirt was torn. He was wearing only boxers. He sat down at the base of a tree just 15 feet away from where I was hiding. I stayed completely quiet, just watched. Then he took off a bag he was carrying and started looking through it. He sat there for a few more minutes. And then his phone rang. He answered it, but didn't say anything. About 10 seconds later, he got up, threw his phone, and ran off into the forest, his flashlight still on. leaving the bag behind. Once his light disappeared into the trees, I climbed down and looked inside the bag. There was an expensive camera and a wallet. Just as I was about to reach for the wallet, I looked up and saw a light in the distance. But this light was different. It came from another flashlight. I quickly climbed back into the same tree. The man's phone rang again. The person with the new light moved toward the sound. When the phone stopped ringing, they searched the area, but they never came close to the bag. Once I couldn't see the light anymore, I climbed down and ran. I got home around 5 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't tell my caretakers either. They'd be furious if they found out I'd gone into the forest at night. So the next day, I took a bus to the local police station and told them what had happened. I brought someone from the station to the spot, but the bag was gone. I showed them the area where the phone had been thrown, but we couldn't find that either. In the days and weeks that followed, I kept checking the news looking for any story that might explain what happened, but I never found anything. After that, I stopped sneaking out at night, and I've never gone back to the forest alone. This happened earlier last year, and it still gives me chills when I think about it. I'm a woman and I work as a delivery driver for Uber Eats. I've been doing it for about a year now just to make some extra money. And it's a pretty easy job, but the pay isn't great, especially at night. Most of the orders I get after 10 p.m. are just crappy fast food runs to customers who rarely tip. Like maybe 2 out of 10 people actually leave a tip. So yeah. Late night deliveries, not really worth it, that's why I almost never do them. But earlier that year, there was a bonus offer, complete 15 deliveries in a certain time frame and get an extra $75. That sounded amazing. When that kind of bonus is available, late night deliveries become a goldmine, no traffic. And it doesn't matter where the pickups are from, it's all about hitting that number fast. The faster you finish your deliveries, the sooner you go home with extra cash in your pocket. With the empty roads, it was perfect for me. I was on a roll that night, finished my last McDonald's delivery at 2:30 a.m, earned my bonus and called it a night. For context, this happened in downtown San Diego. The center of downtown has nice restaurants and clubs, but once you move away from the core, it gets sketchy fast. There are homeless camps and a lot of rough areas. I usually avoid that part of town, but to get home and onto the freeway I had to drive through it. Now I drive a 2002 Ford Focus. It's old. Nothing in it is automatic. If I want to roll the windows up or down, I have to reach over and crank a lever. It's a hassle. So most of the time I just leave both windows down while I'm doing deliveries. Makes it easier to pick up and drop off food. Unfortunately, that night was no different. My windows were still down. I had planned to roll them up before passing 16th Street. That's where the biggest homeless camp is. But I never got the chance. I turned onto a side street heading toward the main road when I saw a man standing on the sidewalk up ahead. He was wearing one of those orange reflective construction vests. There's always some kind of road work happening downtown, especially at night, so I didn't think much of it. But as I got closer, he suddenly ran into the street, right into the middle of the lane. He started waving his arms, signaling me to stop. At first I thought maybe he was redirecting traffic because of construction, so I slowed down trying to figure out what was going on. I brought my speed way down, leaving some distance between us, but then he started jogging toward my car. Before I knew it, he was standing directly in front of me, blocking my path. He was close enough that I couldn't drive around him. I was stuck. That's when I felt it, this rush of unease. This was strange, and I really wished I had rolled my windows up. It was 3 a.m. on a dark, empty street. Just me and him. I've heard about fight or flight responses, and I always wondered how I'd react if something like this happened. Now I know I freeze. It took me a few seconds to realise something was off. This guy wasn't a construction worker. Not really. He had the vest and the hard hat, but what really got me was his smile. It was wide, unnatural. At first I thought maybe he was just trying to be friendly, but the smile never faded. It was stuck on his face. Count to 5 in your head while holding a smile. That's what it felt like. Now that he was right in front of me, I could tell he was probably homeless. He looked like he was in his 60s. But you know how hard living on the streets can age a person. His eyes were wide and that grin, all his teeth showing, just staring at me. The way he smiled. It reminded me of Twisty from American Horror Story. You can Google him if you want. I should have reversed. I should have done something. But my brain was in full panic mode. I just sat there, paralysed. He still hadn't said a word. Then he jumped onto the hood of my car, started slamming his fist down, pounding, again and again, and then he started crawling around on the hood on his hands and knees. I was frozen just staring at him. And he stared right back, never looked away, not even once, just pounding and crawling, his eyes locked on mine. With that horrible toothy grin, I wanted to be sick. My windows were still open and I was terrified that if I moved or looked away, he might try to get into the car. The silence made it worse. I think if he had said anything, it would have been less scary. But he didn't, just kept crawling and pounding and grinning. It probably only lasted 15 seconds, but it felt like forever. Then, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. A car was coming down the street behind me. And just like that, the man jumped off my car and ran toward the new vehicle. I slammed the gas pedal and didn't look back until I was halfway home on the freeway. My heart was still pounding, my body full of adrenaline. After that night, I stopped doing late night deliveries for a long time. I definitely never go near that part of downtown anymore. I take a longer route home now, and I always keep my windows rolled up at night. What I learnt that night was just how naive I'd been. I trusted him because of the uniform. I didn't even question it when he signalled me to stop. I thought I was being careful. I thought, oh great, a public servant trying to help. But by the time I realised something was wrong, it would have already been too late if he had wanted to hurt me. I tried to calm myself by thinking he was probably just a mentally ill guy who didn't mean any harm. And maybe that's true. Maybe. But what really bothers me, what still creeps me out, is how convincing he was. That vest, that helmet, standing in the middle of the road, signalling like someone with authority. It made everything feel more believable, and it nearly got me hurt. This happened more than 20 years ago. I was driving home with my girlfriend after spending the evening at my aunt's house in Esteta. It was Christmas Eve and my mum's side of the family always had a big party there. My girlfriend had never met my family before, so I was a little nervous about how she'd feel being around so many new people, but she fit right in chatting easily with my aunts, uncles and cousins. They all seemed to like her and she seemed to enjoy herself too. We spent most of the afternoon and evening talking, playing poker, opening presents, and drinking. By the time we had to leave, my girlfriend was pretty tired, so I was the one driving us home. It was around 1100 p.m. and I was driving her car. That stretch of road is surrounded by farms and thick patches of forest. Some parts don't have any street lights at all, but I wasn't worried. I grew up around here. I knew the road well. We were just driving and talking. Two young people enjoying each other's company. There's a part of the highway that goes down a steep long hill before crossing over Deep Creek. On both sides of the road there are thick dark woods and no lights at all. The only thing we could see was the stretch of road lit up by our headlights. I drove down the hill, crossed the bridge and began climbing the other side through more forest. As the highway started to level out, Something suddenly darted across the road so fast I almost hit it. I slammed on the brakes. I turned to my girlfriend and asked if she saw it too. She said she did, but she couldn't tell what it was. We both thought maybe it was a coyote. They're pretty common around here, but something about it felt off. Coyotes don't usually run straight in front of cars like that, so for some reason, I decided to check it out. I turned the car around and switched on the high beams to light up the forest where it had gone. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the trees, but I didn't see anything. I looked around trying to spot movement, but there was nothing unusual. Then the car's horn suddenly blared, loud and long. Not a short honk, not something you do to just get someone's attention. It was urgent. I hurried back to the car and asked my girlfriend why she had honked. She didn't say anything, she just pointed. About 50 feet from where I had been standing. That's where I saw it. It looked like the same thing that had run across the road, but it wasn't an animal, it was a man. He was covered in dirt and mud from head to toe. In one hand, he held a hatchet. There was something wild about the way he looked. It made my stomach turn. He glanced at us, then gave a strange smile and waved. Then, without a word, he turned and walked back into the darkness of the woods. We were so shocked and so scared. We jumped in the car and drove away as fast as we could. Once we were back on the main road, my girlfriend told me what she saw. While I was looking for him, in the woods, he had circled around. He came out from another part of the forest outside the reach of the headlights. She caught him out of the corner of her eye. Walking toward me, hatchet raised. That's when she hit the horn, to warn me. When we got home safely, we called the police. They said they never found anyone, or maybe they did, and just didn't tell us. The officer we spoke to believed the man was trying to ambush someone walking alone, but we all agreed my girlfriend's quick thinking probably saved my life, because in that moment, the man realized I wasn't alone.